So here we go on the fourth and final day of this wonderful course on vector surveillance presented by Prof. Neil Lobo. What a ride it's been. I hope you've all enjoyed the ride. I certainly have done so. And the very strong attendance, we've had about 700 people each day listening in. And that reflects the quality of the presentations that sustains the interest by all of you to continue coming in every day, to continue listening in and learning and sharing that wonderful mountain of experience that Neil has to share with us all. So a very warm welcome to all of you to this final day of the 4-day vector surveillance course. It's organized by APMEN, the Asia Pacific Malaria Elimination Network, but the course is based overwhelmingly on something that's called the ESPTN MEI, which stands for the Entomological Surveillance Planning Tool, which was developed under the auspices of the University of California, San Francisco Malaria Elimination Initiative. And our presenter, Prof. Neil Lobo, was the primary person responsible for developing that internationally recognized guidelines that are embedded in the web. And the access to this ESPT tool, Wulan will upload it or share it with you in the chat box so that you can download it and go through it in your own time and share it with colleagues and so on. Wonderful, excellent course. So welcome. The course again is going to last about 2 hours. Roughly midway through, we'll have a 10-minute comfort break. Just a reminder again that at the bottom of your screen, you will see there's a chat box and there's a Q&A box amongst other options. If you have questions, we encourage you. We would welcome questions to Neil for clarification, or any questions you may have about vector surveillance would be welcomed. Please place your questions in the Q&A box, not the chat box. There are too many people, too many questions, so we monitor the Q&A box and not the chat box. I should mention also that Neil is very good at responding to these questions. Those that we don't respond to on the particular day, we will collect. We have collected all your questions from the start, and I promise you, we will respond to them all. If we don't get to them now, we'll respond to them after the course, and they will be emailed, they will be sent out. So be assured, don't worry, if we don't get to your question today, we will respond to it and we will get it back to you. Please also take note that all the sessions have been and will continue to be recorded. Wulan and Dr. Pon will share the links with you in the chat box where you can access the recordings. And it's two sites. One is on YouTube, and then the other one is on the www.oreen.org website. And we would encourage you to visit that www.oreen.org website. There's a wealth of information for vector control specialists accessible there. There's also a discussion forum where you can participate in discussions, pose questions, and interact with other entomologists. Today is a bit different from the previous days. You will remember at the start of the course, for those of you that were present at that time, we had a pre-course questionnaire to establish a baseline of what is the average knowledge about vector surveillance among the audience on day one. And we said we would like to do a post-test, similar questionnaire survey, so that we can measure the increase, hopefully not decrease, but hopefully the increase in knowledge about vector surveillance that has happened over the duration of the course. So what's going to happen is that after Neil has completed his presentations today, Wulan will put up a little QR code and show you how to access. Wulan will explain to you how to access that post-course questionnaire so that you can complete that. We ask a very big please to all of you, because that's the only way we are going to be able to measure the success of this particular course. So we ask you to spend that 15 to 20 minutes to respond to the questionnaire. Then we are going to go into a question and answer session where you can pose additional questions during the time that you are busy with the questionnaire. Neil will frantically try and respond to many of the questions in the Q&A box, but if there are any left afterwards, Neil will address some of those. And we will also invite 2 or 3 of you maybe to pose live questions after the questionnaire. Right at the end, again, we ask your indulgence and ask you, pretty please, we will have a satisfaction evaluation, a very short poll. It will not take more than 2 minutes of your time, where we have a few questions just for you to tick some boxes to let us know, no, we weren't happy with the way this course was run, or yeah, we think you did a reasonably good job, just to give us a sense of what are we getting right, what did we get wrong. It helps us for that next course. So to one and all of you, our audience out there from all across the world, we're grateful that you're setting aside time to join us. We're convinced you are going to enjoy this final day again and benefit from it. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Neil. Thank you, Neil. Thanks so much.
Leo, there was one question that you might want to answer that was in the chat box, and that was about the certificates. Would you describe that process?
Oh, sure. All right. I didn't, sorry, I missed that. Too busy talking. Yes, certificates will be issued, signed certificates will be issued, certificate of attendance of the course. Now, you know, I need you to understand, please, if you enroll for a bachelor's degree, you have to attend all the, you know, the different courses and so on over the 3 or 4 year duration of that degree course. If you miss out 6 months of the 3-year course, you will not get your degree. And it's the same with this 4-day course. Certificates will only be issued to those participants that, according to the computer system, attended each of the 4 days. So those that attended all 4 days will be receiving a signed certificate that, you know, you can use for your CV and so on. And I ask, you know, I hope you understand why we cannot just randomly issue them to everybody that attended part of the course. Yeah, anyway, I hope that explains it. Thank you, Neil.
Cool. I guess it's me now. Last day. I hope you'll have all survived okay the last 3 days. In the last 3 days, we went over a sort of logical framework of how to ask a question, figure out indicators that would answer that question, sampling methods that would collect the indicators that would answer your question, how to select sites, what kind of surveys to do, as well as a surveillance framework, how often to collect samples, when to collect samples, and what would be ideal for in an operational context. We also went over an example in Panama of what was conducted using the ASPT and how it changed policy. Today, we're going to do something slightly different, and we're going to try and take everything we learned over the last few days and apply it to a question. And we'll try and work through that whole process with a question. And towards that, to begin, I'm going to just go over what is the, I think I shared the wrong screen just now. Well, I'm going to go over what what would be the little ESPT, which is the electronic ESPT. I hope you can see this screen right now, how to use the little ESPT. Now, if you all looked at the ESPT, these are the different parts. What is your question, your indicators, your sampling methods, your site selection, sampling design, and capacity and funding. You can do this yourself by looking at the PDF document that I hope you downloaded. However, it is an 80-page document, and that's a lot of reading, and I don't feel like reading it. And I was a huge part of getting it written and presented. So, no, that's not the preferable option. So, what we did was we created with support from people at Liverpool and a game designing company actually to create the electronic ESPT, which we're calling the little ESPT, little E SPT. And what we're going to do is try and understand how to use it and work through an example question. So if you want to know how to get this, Google again, you've seen these slides before, Google ESPT MEI, and you should be able to go to this page where you can download a PDF version of the ESPT. At the same time, if you find the little ESPT, and that is, you can have the Mac download or the Windows download, and I've already downloaded the Mac version from my computer because I use a Mac. There are different languages, as you can see over there as well. You can look through YouTube's videos that go over the entire process as well, the ESPT process. So when you're bored, instead of playing a game at your desk, you can look through these videos. And again, as I mentioned, these are the people that you can contact, including me, for any questions at any point in time in the future, even like a year down the line. If you have a question, please feel free to message us. And all this will be shared with you all, so you all will have these slides. So introducing the ESPT, as I mentioned, it is a large document, the PDF version. So what we have done is this little ESPT. Now, each of these segments that we went through, what is your question? What are the minimal essential indicators is divided into a step for the little ESPT. Step 1 is your question. Step 2 is your minimal essential indicators. Step 3 has all these 3 parts in it, and you can work through it in any order you want. And step 4 is looking at your capacity and funding. And I will go through each of these. And here's just an example of what it looks like on your computer. And we will go through this as well. That's another screenshot because you can view everything that you have on the PDF version. You can view on your screen. You can just pull it up based on what you're looking at or what you want to look at. At the end, now this is something I think that is really nice. At the end, you walk through the entire process, and at the end, you can actually download a Word document with all the decisions you have made and the reasons why. And the reason why we wanted this is that you can save to your computer a Word document of what you thought through. So you, for example, if your boss says, "Hey, I want to figure out why transmission is going up at my site," you can go through 5 different strategies and you'll have 5 different Word files, and you can actually go back and change your strategy and download it and look at them and compare them and go to your boss and be like, "Hey, look at this Word file. All my processes and thoughts are in there." And in addition, since it's a Word file, you can change it. You can convert it into a report. You can convert it into a grant. You can convert it and copy paste into your global fund application, for example. So we wanted this output based on your question, based on your thinking, based on your priorities. We wanted an output that you can use for multiple purposes. And these can be, for, as I mentioned, for grants, to show to your boss, for a decision-making meeting to understand what our options are. So you can use this for all those things. And I'll go through this at the end as well. So when can you use the little ESPT? You can use it just for fun or as part of your job to design research strategies for surveillance planning, for surveillance meeting, and during training as well. When you're doing training for entomological surveillance, You can actually use this as a trainer as to train the trainer, right? So you can learn how to use it and then train someone else how to use it, because it's sort of the whole point is that you can work through this and it's easy to use and you don't need outside help because everything's in there. So you can actually use this little ESPT to train your team in better decision making and in learning how to do better entomological surveillance. So when you start, I'm just going to go through a a PowerPoint version of this, and then we'll go through the actual file. So this is a screenshot of what we actually see. So we start and we can actually go through a new file over here. You can actually you can see recent documents that you made or recent entomological surveillance plans that you made, or you can actually save them on your desktop as ESPT files. We have a new kind of file called an ESPT file, and you can open up your old versions of your file, in addition to your Word file. And then your instructional videos at every step, so you can watch the video that tells you what to do. So when you start, step one would be, what is your question? And the first page is always an overview of what this is about. So even if you don't have your PowerPoints in front of you that we're sending and sharing with you, you can look through this and figure out exactly what the overview is. And here are the different steps. Select an objective, formulate your objectives. There's guidance for it and key concepts if you wanted to go through it. And this is why, because of the detail we have in here, it's a really good training system to train anyone you want to. And of course, the instructional videos, and you'd formulate your question here, and we'd go through that. And that is, what is your question? The next step is to select your minimum essential indicators, and it's the same thing. You'd go through that same process. There's the overview, there's guidance, there's indicators and key concepts. You can watch an instructional video, right? That's where we are, indicators. The next one is the last three of them together, looking at sampling methods, analytical techniques, and sampling design. Again, for each one of these, you can have sampling methods, all the guidance and everything. In our analytical techniques, all the guidance and sampling design, all the guidance will be under there if you hit the plus. Again, they're instructional videos. And you hit go by clicking on each one of them. That's this step. And the last one is your assessment of capacity. Do you have enough funds? Cost considerations. And it's the same thing. We have a budget calculator in there. And since we technically don't know your budgets and we don't know how much things cost at your site, we made this really, really sort of open. And we'll go through this with the real ESPT. But let's say your budget available, you input that there. And then based on what you want to do, you can input your human resources, your equipment, your travel, or anything you want. And then you can put the unit cost, and the total cost is out here. And based on your budget available, it'll tell you the difference. And hopefully you'll have extra money left over, right? So, but you can change it based on that. You can also change your currency based on what country you're in. And so this budget calculator can actually tell you if you can afford it based on your available budget. And if you can't, you can save that and show it to your boss, or you can go all the way back to step one and start redoing steps to make it more affordable. Decision trees, as I went through, and I'll go through one specifically over here. This is important. If you remember what a decision tree is, I think I have a couple of slides on this following here. This goes through every single part of the process that you might have to think through. And even though this looks complicated, it's actually not. And this is applicable to any step, any time in this process you wanted to see, am I thinking about this right? Have I thought about everything? Will this outcome result in a high alert? Or is this an early warning for something, right? You can think through, all this has been thought through, and you can reference this just to make sure you're doing everything. You've thought about everything when you're actually implementing or trying to figure out an appropriate strategy moving forward. A decision tree. What is a decision tree? I think I went over this briefly on day 1 or 2. Like, you have a decision, and an answer can be yes, so it can be no. And based on if it's yes or no, you either do you have multiple options. And even though this might look complicated, like the previous, right, that screen, that looks pretty complicated. It's actually not, because what ends up happening is you go, what's the answer to this? Yes. What's the answer to this? Yes. And it's just option 4. So you can work through that just pretty simply. But the fact is, since you have already thought through all the gray boxes, you've already considered everything, so that everything is the back of your mind and you know you're making the best decision moving forward. Here's a very stupid example, and I think I made this when I was hungry. uh, do I eat dinner at home? No, I'm not going to eat dinner uh, at home. And so the answer is yes, actually. I want to eat dinner at home. So I can ignore which restaurant I might want to go to. So is there food at home, right? If there's no food, I might want to go to a restaurant or grocery, but I'm going to ignore that because there is food at home. So I'm just going to eat dinner. So that's a simple, please don't laugh at me. I like to eat, and I was definitely hungry when I made this. And I don't know if there was dinner at home, but that's how a decision tree works. So there are multiple decision trees in the ESPT. We have them based on the type of survey we're doing. If you remember yesterday, we went through the types of survey. We have baseline surveys, and in the baseline, we have 7 kinds of decision trees. Each decision tree corresponds to a specific indicator or a group of indicators. For example, baseline decision tree A looks at vector occurrence and density. Baseline B looks at vector biting behavior, like where and when mosquitoes bite. Baseline C looks at indoor resting density. That, of course, is related to indoor residual spraying. Oops, sorry. Baseline D is host preference. Baseline E is insecticide resistance. Baseline F is intervention efficacy. Baseline G is larval habitat occupancy. The decision trees can be used, these decision trees can be used for baseline surveys at sentinel sites, at baseline surveys at foci sites, or for spot surveys. If you don't have data for that specific indicator and you're forming a baseline set of data for that indicator, you can reference these. Obviously, if your question, for example, looks at multiple indicators, you'd want to reference multiple decision trees. So, for example, if you're trying to find out if bed nets would be useful at your site, how do bed nets work? They work based on when and where vectors bite. So you look at vector biting behavior, as well as insecticide resistance, because your vector has to be susceptible to the insecticide, right? So decision trees for routine surveys or monitoring receptivity. So these are where you would go back to the same site, right? And these are slightly different from your baseline surveys because you might leave some things out or you might add some things in. So for routine A, is vector occurrence and density. Routine B, you can see the similar indicators, but you might want to approach them differently. Routine B is vector biting behavior. Routine C is indoor resting density. Routine D is insecticide resistance. And routine E is larval habitat occupancy. We also added a routine monitoring in areas for preventing reestablishment, or POR. I know there were a couple of questions about this. Please reference this specific tree for this specific context, because we want everyone in this training to be able to use this tree one day when there's no more transmission. So that is our final goal, to be able to use the routine monitoring in areas to prevent reestablishment, or POR. So these routine decision trees obviously are used at sites, at sentinel sites, to monitor changes, to see what's happening, how our interventions are impacting our transmission system. We want to monitor these changes in vectors. And look at the impact of these interventions. Obviously, at the same time, since we're looking at changes after implementing an intervention, we want to actually relate this to our epidemiology, right? Does this have an impact on epidemiology? Has incidence gone down? Is incidence going up? And here you can actually see the reasons why. Look at the indicators why what we see. Look at the indicators to explain what we see epidemiologically, based on your question, of course. We can also use these for routine surveys in active foci where there's very low transmission. Then there are decision trees for focus investigations. There was a couple of questions about this as well. And we have divided this into two phases, primarily because a focus investigation looks at trying to prevent onward transmission because we have a focus of transmission. We have an outbreak. So the phase one looks at like overall decisions, overall what's happening. We look at priority, epi, ento, environmental, and intervention data, because we want to find out all the drivers that are causing that outbreak. And phase two is one that you do far less, perhaps annually, and this examines the entomological drivers of transmission in this foci, and this focuses on those entomological drivers of transmission. So if I were going to use this decision tree, I'd walk through phase one because you want to prevent onward transmission, and then I'd walk through phase two in that order. And here's an example of baseline indoor resting density. So here we want to look at the proportion of vectors resting indoors. And this is just one indicator, and I'm going to walk through this. So at the top left is you start here, obviously. So look for the start here and start there. That kind of makes sense. And your first question is, I hope you all can all read this. I know the lettering is a bit small. Your first question is the indoor resting density known in unsprayed houses and sprayed houses if IRS is conducted? Now, if you don't know the answer to this, then the next step is, okay, great. We need to sample adult anopheles indoors using PSCs or indoor aspirations, because we want to look and see in the unsprayed houses if mosquitoes are resting on those walls. And then after we do that, we want to determine species-specific vector occurrence and vector densities of these vectors resting indoors morphologically. So we'd look at these indoor resting mosquitoes and we'd see what species they were, because remember, different species do different things. And please note, if you click on this vector occurrence, you'd go to the vector occurrence baseline indicator tree. If you looked at vector density, you'd still go to that same occurrence and vector density tree, because there is a decision tree for that, to make sure that you've thought about everything. If you have a bunch of money and a bunch of people and a bunch of time, and I wish we all did, the high capacity option is to look at the species specific density molecularly. For example, you can use PCR or sequencing or something like that. But the little dotted lines means this is minimal. It's not minimal essential. It is a high capacity option. So we've presented both things, one a minimal essential as well as nice to have, so high capacity options. And based on this data, we can now calculate the species-specific indoor resting density at my site. Now we've got this data, which is awesome. Now we go to step two, which is out here. The answer is now, I think it's yes. Oops, I forgot about these animations. Once the answer is yes, now we look at, are these vectors resting indoors, right? And if it's yes, we go here. If it's no, we go here. So if it's no, is IRS currently conducted at this site? Yes and no. In the same way, we just work through that tree. And once we work through this, if vectors are resting at this site, we'd go, is IRS currently conducted at this site? Right? Because yes and no. Is IRS conducted and is IRS not conducted, right? The vectors might be resting or not. And based on that, we have a yes and no as well. And these are outcomes or suggestions or things to look at. Or every now and then we have warning systems. For example, if an invasive species is detected and things like that. So you look through all that. These bluish green highlighted sections will take you to other specific trees that allow you to understand this better. So here's the end of it, and you can walk through these on your own time. And yep, that's an example of a decision tree. If you look at the ESPT downloadable Word document, you can go through the top, we'll go through this and generate the plan, and you get this document, as I talked about, the Word document that you can distribute, you can share, you can edit, you can put your own institution's name on top, you can delete anything on there, any animation, you can add your own picture in there if you wanted, you can do anything you wanted to it. But the key point is that everything you work through, the objectives, the indicators, your sampling methods, your analytical techniques, and the reasons why you picked them will all be in that document for you to use for whatever you wanted to use. So now we're going to work through an example of the little ESPT. And before we work through the example, here is something that I just wanted to remind you of. And this is the example we're going to work through. It's one that we have sort of talked about, so I hope it's familiar with you and the concepts regarding this question, which is where and when are the gaps in protection with bed nets at my site? So we're going to have to remember that question because I have a bad memory. Where and when are the gaps in protection with bed nets at my site? And remember, the intervention here, bed nets, function with the overlap of human behavior and mosquito behavior. And we want to understand the gaps in protection. And towards understanding that, we also need to understand the protection. And if you remember this, I'm pretty sure you remember this, how bed nets work and how they don't work. So this is what we're going to have to look at or include in our thinking process. And oh, this was out of order. Looking at it. Oh yeah, I wanted to look at a decision tree in the ESPT before going to what are the gaps in protection with bed nets. And to look at the decision trees, you'd go to this top left little section, and then down here you can see decision trees, and there are multiple different kinds of decision trees, and you can click on each one of them, and you can work through them. And we'll do that before starting everything right now. Did anyone have any quick questions before I started going through decision tree? Were there any, Leo?
Sorry, Neil. Yeah, sorry. Let me just share screen.
So, of course, I shared screen. I will stop sharing.
Okay. So there are four quick ones, Neil. Do two or three, as you know, depending on how much time you feel you have available.
Yeah. So, what is the difference between surveillance, monitoring, and assessment? I think you've confused me as well. Surveillance is sort of to survey, right? To see what's happening. So you'd ask a question and go see what's happening. Monitoring, I could be wrong about these definitions because I'm speaking just off the cuff right now. Monitoring is when you want to see changes in what's happening. For example, you're monitoring if mosquitoes change their behaviors in response to an intervention. So you'd go back to the same sites, to the same places to see if mosquitoes are doing something different. Monitoring can be part of surveillance. An assessment is an evaluation. So you can monitor something and take the data and assess it and evaluate it. So there's sort of overlapping words, overlapping definitions, but overall, you would use your surveillance system to monitor things and you'd assess the outcomes to make a decision. I hope that made sense. Uh, why is the SPT not supported in your Windows after downloading it? Whoa, I am so sorry. If you message the team or someone on the team, message Steve Gowello, Gowelo, and he should be able to help you. Message him. It should work. Can we modify this tree or is it permanently like that? So technically, you cannot modify the trees that are in the little ESPT. But you can download sections of it based on how you walk through the tree. You can use those trees and copy paste them and edit them, and I'm completely fine with you doing that as long as it makes sense to do the edits that you actually make. In Cambodia, we are on the launching of POR. The question is, we have found about 17,000 villages, and I'm sure we do not have the entomological proof for these villages. What will be the best approach to align the interventions in the course of the POR implementation, especially the vector control measures? This is a large question. It's going to take time to answer it. So we'll save this for later. But the short version is, if we're looking at prevention of reintroduction, you want to make sure there are no new cases. So I'll base the sites that you do your entomological assessments in on the ones with the highest risk. Perhaps there were outbreaks there, or perhaps the highest risk of getting malaria again. I do my entomological assessments there. I do it geographically, so it's representative of a greater region. And this would be based on my question. Am I just looking at the entomology, or am I looking at the entomology towards putting bed nets there if there is an outbreak? Or am I putting in entomology, trying to understand entomology so that I can put in IRS as a response to an outbreak? Because obviously you've eliminated malaria there. So I would ask a question and pick a site based on that's most at risk, especially with POR, and select minimal essential indicators and move from there. I hope that was helpful.
Thank you, Neil. Please proceed if you're ready.
Yeah. I will now share my screen of the little ESPT. Perfect. There you go. So when you open the little ESPT and the little, like any program, it has like a widget or a little picture, it looks exactly like the top right up here. And when you open it, this is what you see. It's sort of blank, but you can go through, you can open up any recent documents here. You can view the documents here. You can browse to find your document, or you can start a new one. We're going to start a new one. But before we start a new one, I'm going to go to this and click on it. And that's also with start a new one. Once you need to start a new one to save it, or open an older one, or to generate a plan. But you can change your language here. So depending on your language, you can change your language. There's a limited set of languages, but you can try and see if your language is included there. You can watch an intro video, additional content, or you can open up the ESPT PDF. But we're going to go through decision trees. So here we are. We have our baseline decision trees, which are not opening for some reason. There we go. Our routine decision trees and our focus investigation decision trees. Here we can actually look at text about these. And let's say we work through baseline C, which is indoor resting density again. Start here. So is the indoor resting density known in unsprayed houses? Let's say it's yes. Now over here, it doesn't go through the no because you already have that data. Are there vectors resting indoors? No, and it works through that. Let's say it's yes, and it works through that. And that's the end of your tree. We've gone through exactly what we wanted. If we want to restart the tree, it'll go to restart. I clicked up here. If you want to go to reveal all to see the entire tree, go to reveal all, and it'll show you the entire tree. And if you want to restart again, and let's say I walk through this, go to 2 goes to no. I'm just making this up. Yes, we ignore everything that's not part of it. And this is the final tree that I might use because this is applicable to my system. It's not the complete tree. What you can do is then export this as a PNG and save it to your desktop because this is exactly your decision process and why. And you can copy and paste it into your Word file. So everyone will know exactly why you thought, what you did, and the reasons why. So you can use every single decision tree and work through all of them. And this is really helpful, actually, for you to see the processes, the background, what's actually happening, because it sort of includes everything. And if you feel we've missed anything, please let us know because we're all not the smartest people on the planet. So a group of us can probably produce something far better together. So please let us know what you think and if we can improve these. So this is our decision trees. I just wanted to go over that before starting our question. So we click new. And here's our first step, step 1. What is our question? Everything should start with what is our question? And this is the overview. We want to formulate and input a priority program question. We would select, it just goes through exactly what to do. And I've gone through this. If you want to watch an instructional video,
watch this video for instructions on navigating step 1 in the ESPT. Use the buttons in the bottom right-hand corner as a simple way to move between screens. Navigation buttons will activate when a required input is made.
I'm not going to go through the whole video, but I just wanted to show you an example of the instructional videos at every step. Now let's go through formulating our question, right? And here we would formulate our question. And here are the tips up here. And the question are LLRNs and, oh no, I'm sorry, I forgot. See, I told you I'd forget the question. What are the gaps in protection with lines at my site or my geography or whatever it is. So let's say that's our question. Of course, you can ask multiple questions. Now we want to select our objectives, as in what do we want to achieve? And this is kind of important because this actually can down select some things downstream. So our bed nets are effective. Now we go through to see what's relevant. Vector species composition is relevant. Seasonality is irrelevant. We want to determine the impact of the adult vector control interventions, bed nets, of course. Uh, Larval source management, we can skip that. Determine adult vector behavior, yes, because that's how bed nets function. Determine insecticide resistance, yes, because that's how bed nets function. Host preference, I'm going to go for minimal essential indicators and leave this out. However, if you wanted to keep it in for whatever reason, keep it in and see how it matches your budget. See how it maps out to your question. This is not a minimal essential indicator for this specific question. Larval composition? Probably not, because we're going to get the adults anywhere. Determine access to quality and use of interventions? Probably yes, because it's bed nets. Human behaviors and associated risk factors? Yes, because human behavior dictates LLI and functionality. And these are what I just selected. I know every time this is interactive, we have a lot of discussion on what's appropriate and what's not, and that's really good. But this not being interactive makes it easy for me. I don't have to deal with discussions and people saying yes, no. But please note, I'm not always right. I am often wrong. So please look at the evidence, see what's best for you and see what's best at your site. And this is an example to just show you how to work through this. So please ignore any mistakes I may have made or any disagreements you may have. So now the next step is to formulate our objectives, which we just did. And let's say we want to identify where and when. I'm so bad at typing. L-lines are effective and not. I'm gonna to save time, I'm just going to write this. You can write down a whole paragraph. You can write down anything you wanted in here. This doesn't dictate anything, but this does get downloaded into your Word file. You can write down this is for a global fund application or any notes you wanted to write over here. You could write down anything you want. The next step, you can always go back and select objectives, and then you can review the question again. So this is a review. Here is your question. What is the gaps in protecting with bed nets at my site? Here are the objectives. And here is sort of any text you want to write in there that describes what you want to do, that can help you, that can download and help describe. You can put sites in there, your country, anything. Now that we've done this, we go to step 2. The step 2 overview is here. Step 2 is selecting minimal essential indicators. There's guidance out here. Here's where we select our indicators. We'll go to that in a second. And here are key concepts that you might want to consider reading. We want to select our indicators. Now, so these indicators, as it says here, are already down selected based on the objectives. If you click on this, it'll show you all indicators. Please note the larval habitatability, availability, and occupancy were not there. So these are suggested indicators based on your selection of objectives. So let's say I would always click on this to see if the selection was right, because as I said, we could be wrong, right? And here are all the indicators that you could possibly collect. The reddish pinkish ones were not down selected. If you notice, if you click on that, there'll be less indicators. So now let's say, I'm going to make this simple. Let's look at these indicators. We're going to look at occurrence, density, seasonality, human biting rate, biting time, biting location. Indoor resting density, does that have to do with bed nets? Probably not. Let's leave that out for now. Resistance frequency, yes, resistance status, because that has to do with how bed nets function. Supplemental indicators. I'm going to go for minimal essential. I don't have any money. So I'm going to ignore human blood index, host preference, intensity, resistance mechanism. Should I do resistance mechanism? Now, here's a question, right? Now, let's say malaria has gone up, and it might be because there's there is methylase-based resistance. You might want to add that in. But I'd add that in if my question was, is there PBO based, will PBO nets impact the gaps in protection in my study? Please note what was my original question, and selecting this will tell us how to redirect our question if this is part of the answer or the decision making you're doing. Since my question does not look at resistance, it does not look at mechanisms, does not look at changes in what nets to use, I'm going to leave this out. But please note, if you want to add it in for very specific reasons, make sure your question includes that. Be directive and be focused with what your question is. I'm going to leave out resistance mechanisms, sporozoite rate, entomological inoculation rate, because those are all nice to have, and I'm broke and I have no money. Bed nets. So these are indicators for monitoring performance. You might want to look at durability. Let's say yes. Access, we want to make sure everyone has them. We want to make sure people are using them. So these all are WHO indicators that we can possibly include. Let's include them for now. IRS residual efficacy is not relevant. LSM effectiveness is not relevant. Intervention coverage, that might be a good one to add in. So as you can see, we are going through these indicators, and it sort of comprehensively tells you what kinds of things you might want to add in. Because bed nets work only when people are under them, and if people are outside, they don't work. We want to add these indicators that look at human behavior observations, right? The adjusted human biting rate, which is a combination of human behavior and biting rates. And I went over this, and I hope I demonstrated to you how important that is, especially with bed nets, especially when we're looking at exposure. Sleeping times and awake times, yes. Malaria risk factors. We might want to add this in based on what risk factors we're looking at. Are there specific target groups that are going out and getting more malaria? We might want to add that in, but for now, let's leave this out to keep it simple. Do we want to look at parasite importation? Let's not for now. Again, based on your question, we can go back and add anything you want. Just make sure it makes sense. Now we're going to review our indicators. This page just makes you read through to just understand that, to make sure that you've considered everything. For example, has there been a reduction or plateau in funding, right? If you selected all the indicators because they're cool to have, but if you don't have funding, you might want to down select indicators, right? Are there any specific things you want to do? For example, if you can't do HLCs, CDC light traps are appropriate to, for human landing catches? That might be another question you might want to add in beforehand, before asking this question. So there are multiple things like that you might consider before selecting your indicators. Next, you'll review our indicators. Here are all the indicators we want to answer our question. And now we'll go to step 3. And well, before we go to step 3, I'm going to have a sip of tea. Now, step 3 consists of the next 3 steps, which are sampling methods, analytical techniques, and sampling design. When we look at sampling methods, we can go through any order. These all feed into each other a bit, and we can go through any order. As I said before, on the left, we can go through each one of these, the different background data, step guidance, methods, pros and cons for each of the, for example, human landing catch, that's what it is, all the data about it, what are pros and cons. Here's step guidance, how to do this step for selecting sampling methods. If we want to understand them further, we can click on that, and it can take us to detailed descriptions. We can look at multiple tables over here to look at everything to do with that. Here is vector behavior targeted by select interventions. Just peruse these, look through these. There's a lot of data that's been validated that's on there. And here are key concepts as well. And we have this for every step. Analytical techniques, the same thing. Analysis by indicator, select analytical techniques and guidance. Sampling design, similar things. How to select your survey type, site type, key concepts, determining your sampling sites, formulate your sampling design, and we'll work through this all one by one. Let's start off with sampling methods. Go. So here are the recommended sampling methods based on the indicators. So on the right, we see all the indicators we want. Please note that because these indicators, some of them may not have to do with entomology, the sampling methods might not be on the left because this is an entomological surveillance planning tool. We are focused on the entomology. So for example, if you're looking at ITN LLIN access, you might have to formulate that separately because we are focused on entomology. Again, these are recommended methods. If I click on it, there are no additional ones that came up. So that means we basically selected all the recommended methods and they make sense. Now let's work through these. Since we're looking at bed nets, gaps in protection with bed nets, let's say I want to look at biting rate. Human baited traps can collect also biting rates, but since my country allows human landing catches, I'm going to select human landing catches. We do not need indoor resting collections. We can use the CDC light trap as a proxy for your human landing catches, but since my country allows it, I'm not going to do it. We can use human odor baited traps. We technically don't need an animal odor baited trap. I'm not going to use outdoor resting collections, CO2 baited traps. We're not going to use any of these. I am going to add in a larval survey. And I hope you remember why, because we're going to do a larval survey to collect larvae so that we can do resistance tests. Because our bed nets function based on where and when mosquitoes bite, and we can get that based on human landing catches and if they're resistant or susceptible. Please note that human behavior observations, which are vital to this, are not included here because it's not an entomological sampling method. So you can go back to the step overview or go back to methods, pros and cons. And of course, we went through this. It'll tell you everything about them as I showed you before. Here's the overview. And we go back to the page with all three. We selected our sampling method, and here's edit. You can always go back and edit it. But let's say we did a great job and we are completely happy with it. Now let's go to analytical techniques. So here are the indicators we selected, and here are the analysis methods suggested, right? And now we would pick which ones we'd want to use. Because we're collecting multiple species and we want to know species-specific contributions to the disease and how each one of them is, the interventions work against each one of them, we'd want to do identification keys. I do not have money to do PCR, so I'm going to leave that out. But if you do, please click that. And as before, all our selected indicators are on our right. I am not doing salivary gland dissections, ovary dissections, but I'm not going to do ELISAs but I am possibly here. Am I going to do WHO tube assays or CDC bottle assays? Let me see what the active ingredient is on my bed nets. And if it's one that's available with WHO papers, I would use that. If it's not, I'd use the CDC bottle assay. Let's say I'm just going to do a WHO tube assay. Do I have the money to do molecular analysis for type of resistance? No, I'm not going to do that. Cone bioassay, perhaps to see if my bed nets are actually lasting. Because if you remember, we wanted to look at ITN durability. So we want to see how long they last. So yes, to cone assays. Next step is the overview. We go back to this. We've selected our sampling methods, our analytical techniques, and now is sampling design. Here are all the different parts to this. Now, what are we doing here now? Since I want to let's say, I want to look at the gaps in protection of my bed nets at a site that already has surveillance, and I want to do it over a year. So let's say I want to go back every month. I'm making this up as I speak. And please note that your surveys might be completely different. If I don't have any data for it, I might want to do a baseline survey. But then since I want to go back every month, it'll become a routine survey. If I was correct, I hope that makes sense. And then the site type, I'm going to use Sentinel sites because I'm going to go back to that same site again and again to see what happens over a year, over the space of time, over the seasons, over the high transmission season and the dry season. So we can go back to key concepts to understand exactly what's happening. If you remember the sampling type, sampling unit, sample size. The next step is to determine the sampling design. And for that, we want to determine the sampling sites. So again, what my question is out here is outlined out here. And we're going to pick a Sentinel sites with Sentinel sites with a routine survey. Excuse me, while I have another sip of tea. So now we can use this text box. And because people's what we actually do at a site can be so different and so different, you can add in anything here. My site is blah 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 blah. We expect preliminary data or past surveillance says whatever. There are 3 vectors, let's say. And we can say whatever we want here. It sort of characterizes my site so that we know where we're working, what we're doing. In your downloaded Word file, you can add a map in there as well. So you can describe your site and add a map. And of course, don't have a map to your site. So now you can then add your map into that. And then here is where we have our sampling design. And again, as earlier, we do not know what your sampling might be, but we sort of have overall units out here, and you can add more or less. So here's your sampling unit by method or indicator. So let's say we want to do it because we're looking at houses, right? We want to look at the biting rate by house because a BedNet protects a house. Let's say a sampling unit is for our HLC is a house. And let's say at each site, we want to do 5 structures in structures, right? Let's say house inside and outside. I'm working through this, so you can actually just see how my sad brain thinks, and I'm often confused and go back and think through things, which is a good thing, I hope. I hope everyone functions like that. The top line is just an example. And so we want to go monthly so we go back monthly for 1 year. So basically, we have 5 structures per site. Let's say we have 4 sites. We go back monthly for 1 year. And here as a sampling unit allocation. So for example, you can just describe exactly. So in village, in X village, we will select house number because we have codes for them. 3, 9, 6, and you can go down and work through that. You can always add another column and say house type, right? I'm completely making this up right now. Let's say concrete and wood or something like that, because we want to test the efficacy in both different kinds. Now, since we're doing HLCs, we can also add in HBOs and describe what we're going to do. Since we're doing insecticide resistance, we can look at larval sampling and work through this whole until you get a plan outlined that's suitable for what you need. And once you get this done, you can actually have like, how often are we going back to how many houses and how many times per year? And this sort of is an overview. And since I cannot predict what you're going to do, we've sort of made this as flexible for you as possible. You can add in as many rows as you want for multiple indicators, multiple sampling methods. And in the end, we have worked through our sampling methods, our analytical techniques, and our sampling design. And step review, that's it. And now we go to step 4, which is, can we actually afford this? There's an instructional video and a budget calculator. And here is text on cost considerations. Read through this to see if it's helpful, and hopefully it'll enable you to make better decisions. Here's our budget calculator. Just like before, I have no idea what you factored in. We have no idea what you plan to do. So we have budget lines, and you can put multiple lines in there. Let's say we do one for human resource, one for equipment, and one for travel. And let's say our equipment, actually, let's do another one for equipment. So equipment, let's say we want aspirators for our human landing catches. And let's say we need 25 of them. 25 of them. The unit cost is, let's say, $20 each. That calculates how much we need. Let's say human resources for, let's say we have 25 HLC volunteers. I wish I could type better. Unit cost, let's say every day, 25 human landing catch volunteers times, I think it was 4 nights per time, times 12, 12 times per year. That means each person costs, let's say, I'm completely making this up and I'm going to get confused. So 12 times 4 times, let's say $10 each. So 12 4s are 48 times 480. So one person costs 400 and, oh, I'm doing this wrong. Oh, one person costs 480. So, and we have 25 people. Oops. And that's how much they'll cost. $12,000. Crap, that's expensive. And so the travel to the site. So you can see you can walk through this whole thing. And now your original budget, how much budget do I actually have? Let's say I have $20,000. Oh, we have $7,500 extra. Maybe I can up this to 50 collectors. Let's see. 50 collectors. Of course, you have to add all this in. Please don't forget about everything. And so this changes to 50. And oh, I have 4,500 left. Oh, maybe I can do more sampling. Let's change it to 100. So that would be 100. And I'm over budget, 28,500 over budget. So now I can work backwards and go back and either change my entire plan and go back to 50. I think 50 was over budget too, if I said that wrong. Yes, we're $4,500 over budget. So let's say let's do 30. 30 there. Now we are $5,100 under budget. So let's say we're over budget. We can always go through, review the budget. We have $5,100 extra. We can add an indicator in. We can add something else in. But if we're over budget, we can go through and redo step 1 or step 2 or anything, any of these steps to make sure our budget will fit. We can go through that. And the next step is to generate your plan. Let's say you've finished through it, you've got your ideal plan, or you've got a plan that you want to present. You can generate your plan. And this is, let's say, plan 1. And this should download to my desktop. Oh, please download to my desktop. And plan 2 is on my desktop, save. And now it should be on my desktop. And this, oh, I'm not sure if you can even see this. I'm going to have to unshare and share back because it's actually opened up on my desktop. That's what the Word file looks like. My entomological surveillance plan. And if I work through it, here is my question. Here are my objectives, my essential indicators, my sampling methods, my analytical techniques, my sampling design. Everything is mapped out there that I just talked about. Your budget, my budget lines. And note since this is the Word file, I can delete anything I wanted to. I can actually say this is Neil's very bad entomological surveillance plan, or call it whatever you want, right? You can change this and put your own logo on. We are not that special that we need an ESPT plan every single way. It would be nice if you added it, but you don't have to. You can put your organization and your name. This was made by blah, blah, blah. You can put your logo there. You can change the date. It's a Word thing, so you can change this any way you want. And if you remember, you can even put your decision trees in there. So you can, like, let's say I want to delete all this. Delete all this. The ESPT was developed by UCSF MEI. Delete it all if you wanted to, and put your decision tree in there. Your decision tree you work through. You can put in anything you wanted through, but the key point is at the end of it, you have your entire plan out here that you can reference, that you can compare to anything else you wanted. I think that was the whole thing. And I hope that was helpful. But I think I want to go through something else quickly.
Neil, can I just ask this something else is going to take a while? We're due for that mid-session break.
Perfect. Let's take a break. Let's take a break.
Okay.
Apologies.
All right. Thank you, Neil. Certainly a wonderful session that. So audience members, let's take a 10-minute break, reconvene in 10 minutes again. Stretch legs, go to the bathroom, make yourself a cup of tea or something, and we'll reconvene in 10 minutes. Thanks so much. Bye-bye, everyone. Neil, I'm having Neil. Amazing. Thank you for that. Okay, over to you, Neil. You're on mute, Neil.
Thank you, Leo. I was on mute. Hey all, we're back. And so we went through all sort of the logical framework of how to make a really good entomological surveillance plan based on your question-driven entomological surveillance that will direct evidence-based decision making. We also went through the little ESPT and trying to understand and practice, work through an example of how to use the ESPT and download the output and just work through decision trees towards best use of entomological surveillance and outcomes. And technically, I think I was done with them, except I wanted to show you one more thing that I actually forgot to do. So I cannot do it now because I have to work through the whole ESPT. If you can save your ESPT file as an ESPT file on your desktop or anywhere you wanted. And then if you go through the ESPT to the ESPT for open file, you can actually reopen that file. You can go look for that file and reopen it and work through it again or change things you did in it. So, and I think I can share my screen and show you where to do that because I don't have, here we are. So you can actually go through it and save your file. If you had a file open, you could save it and you can name it as you wanted. And then you could open it and navigate and then open that plan and redo that plan or re-examine that plan in the little ESPT window, in this window. And this is separate from your Word document. So you can have a Word document and an ESPT document that actually opens up over there. At this point, we have, I think, about 45, 42 minutes to the end of the training. And I have two things. I think we have the final questionnaire or test, Leo, but also all the questions from the last 3 days that I did have time. I put them in a PowerPoint presentation. We can work through those if you wish now, or we can work through them after the test. What would you suggest, Leo and Wulan? Would you prefer me to go through the questions now, and then we can have final questions later on at the end if we wanted, or we could just work through the test and finish the test now, and then all the remaining time we can spend on answering questions.
Neil, sorry, I was busy responding to the Q&A box, so I missed part of what you said there. But if I understand correctly, and please shake your head or nod as appropriate, you are done with the formal presentations, and we can either move on to the post course questionnaire, or go through some questions. So I think because it's going to take a bit of time to do everything, and of course the questions and answers is a very important element, and we want to get to that. So why don't we open it up now to Wulan? I'm going to ask you to explain to our audience members how to access and what to do regarding the post-course questionnaire. Let me allow the audience into a little secret now. It's going to be exactly the same test that you did at the start of the course. And that is because we want to compare apples with apples. So, you know, it would have been a misleading, and we don't know what level we can rely on a response to a different set of questions. So we're asking the exact same questions as we did at the pre-course, and we see how many of you, what's your score? So please use the same email address that you used for the pre-course questionnaire when you fill this one in. We're going to give you 15 minutes, and then we'll move on to question and answer session. And we will also allow 2 or 3 people to vote, you know, voice their questions. So we're all going to keep quiet now and let you get on with the knowledge assessment. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Leo, for explaining.
Okay, Wulan, do you want to say something about the post-course?
No, I just wanted to say thank you for explaining.
No problem. Yeah. So this is the QR code. People must use that to access the form. And then please go ahead and respond to the tick box questions. And good luck. Thank you very much.
You can also click the link that I shared with you in the chat box so that if you cannot scan the QR codes, you see, just click the link in the chat box. Thank you.
Respond to some more questions, and we are going to allow some people to pose their questions live. We'll activate your audio so you can actually, Wulan, I don't know how you do that, or Dr. Pon, you'll have to do it. I'm not quite sure how you do that. But may I also add, Wulan or Dr. Pon is going to put up on the screen another link to that satisfaction poll that I mentioned earlier on. A very short poll. It probably will not take you more than 1 minute to tick the relevant boxes, but it helps us a great deal to let us know what we did okay and what we can improve on and so on. So we'd be very grateful if you can respond to that. So Neil, I believe that no, there are 2 more questions in the Q&A box. Do you want to try and respond to those?
Sure. How about I look at the questions in the Q&A box while people finish their tests, and then I'll work through all the questions for the last 3 days that
All
we
right. Yeah.
So first question in the Q&A box is, when we have reached the status of residual non-active foci or cleared foci, are there any minimum vector rules required? If yes, what should be the least recommendation? So what is the least amount to do when we have non-active foci, when we've taken malaria out of those sites? So again, what is your question? Is your question based on a response if malaria comes back in? Or is your question based on just monitoring what's happening? If it's based on just monitoring what's happening, you can do what you already did previously at a lower frequency because you don't have malaria there. If it's a response, then either you're preparing for a response or it's a response for malaria, or someone had malaria there. So if you're preparing for a response, I would base it on the consequence. If there was a malaria case, would you give them IRS, or would you give them bed nets? Would you scale up diagnosis and treatment? I would design my surveillance around the possibilities of what you would be able to do if malaria popped up there again. And of course, if malaria did pop up, you'd be ready. So you already have the data to figure out what best to do. How do we submit the assessment form?
I think this is a question for Wulan.
Yeah.
Wulan, I think it's an auto, you just complete the ticks and so on.
Yeah.
You don't need-
So I will share, the Pong will share the link in the chat box. I think if we just share a screen with the QR code, then there will be some distraction for our audience so that I think it's better to just put it in the chat box. Please, try not to post any, how to say, necessary message so that audience can see the link, because we shared it many times here. So Dr. Pong will share the link for the evaluation form. Yeah, I think that's all. Thank you.
Wulan, if I understand correctly, it seems like the person has ticked all the boxes, but they say, okay, now what? Is there a box where I click submit, or is it an auto, you just go out and it's automatically recorded? Or
Oh
do they-
yeah, it'll, you can see the submit button there in the end of the form. So
Okay,
just
so
click submit.
there is a submit button that you need to press. Please, Deepsika, thank you. Good question. Thank you for that, Deepsika. Okay, so I think Wulan or Dr. Porn is now going to also put up the link for the satisfaction poll. While that is happening, and as I said, it's a very short poll, we're also opening up for additional questions, either in the Q&A box, or why don't a few of you raise your hand, and we're going to activate you so that you can speak to us and share your question with us live. The first one is Ogbono Oguru that I can see. So Ogbono, I'm not sure if you've been, unmute yourself, or is it us that need to unmute you? Can you unmute yourself? And there's also Chioma, but Ogbona is first. Wulan, Dr. Pon, as our technical. There we go. Ogbona, you're live. Please ask your questions, Ogbona. Oops. You've just been muted again. There you go. You're live, Ogbona. Ogbona, can you hear me? Please speak. All right, we'll come back to you, Ogbona. But let's give a Chioma a second. Chioma, please.
Okay, good morning.
Hey.
Hi,
Mr.
Chioma. Welcome. Thank you for volunteering. Please go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm actually not asking a question concerning the class. I have a few issues to relate. I stay in Nigeria, and by the time I'm waking up to prepare for work, the class is already on. So I either am on the class while preparing for work, or I just don't attend at all because I'm in a haste to go to work. So I don't know if there's a way for me to attend the previous class, because this section is actually very important for my career.
Yes.
So I don't know if it's
Yes.
possible.
Okay. No,
Okay.
that's a very good question. A very good question, Chioma. There will be many other people, I suspect, that were not able to attend some of the days, or at least one of the days, or miss part of the session. So all the talks in full have been recorded, and Wulan or Dr. Pon will again post the URLs where you can access the recorded presentations. It's one point of access will be in YouTube, and the other one will be in the aureen.org website. So there are two sites where you can access all the presentations. Remember also that all the presentations have been based on the ESPT entomological surveillance planning tool, which is available on the web as well. You just type in Google ESPT space MEI. ESPT stands for Entomological Surveillance Planning Tool. MEI stands Malaria Elimination Initiative. So just type in ESPT space MEI, and you'll have access to the full documentation. Very easy to read and digest. So you can access that or to the recorded sessions. So I hope that helps, Joma. So the other one was Abdul. Abdul, please voice your question.
Yeah, hi everyone.
Hi
Professor
there.
Ned.
Hi there, Abdul.
Yeah.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you. I'm from Niger, and in our country, we have not using IRS for malaria vector control. So there is only a bed net that USAID and the other part now share for the population every 3 years. So in the concerning the goal of malaria elimination, how can I think about the not use of IRS? It will be possible to eliminate malaria if we use only bed nets without using IRS. I think.
Let Neil respond.
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. So I think, Abdul, what you're asking is, at my country, there's just bed nets. How can we manage it? How can we implement other interventions? Because you want to eliminate malaria. So you want to have multiple interventions and multiple spaces and times to curtail, to stop as much transmission as possible. So this is complicated because it all depends on funds and WHO recommendations. So if your country has enough funds, global funds, or any other funds that it has, if it has global funds, you have to follow WHO recommendations, which means they can only do bed nets, IRS, or larval source management right now. However, entities like President's Malaria Initiative, PMI, through PMI Evolve, can implement other interventions like IRS. Now, the decision to implement an intervention like IRS is based on that organization. Like, will they invest the funds in your country? So it can be complicated. However, the best way of doing whatever you want for your own country would be for Niger to somehow get the funds that it can use itself to for what works best in their country. It is a complicated question, and there's not enough funds around. And unfortunately, a lot of these decisions are made by the funders and not by the country. I hope that answers,
Okay.
but it wasn't a very positive answer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So who else is going to volunteer? At least on my screen, I can't. Oh, there's one more. Wulan, do you want to say something? Oh, it's Mulenga. It's Mulenga. Yeah. Wulan or Dr. Poon. There we go. You're live. Mulenga, please proceed.
Hi, thank you so much. This has been quite a very informative session that we've had. And thank you so much, Dr. Neo Lobo. I actually heard of you some time back. You visited Zambia in March at the Johns Hopkins Malaria Research Institute. And some colleagues from there did quite a lot of good appraisal on your work. And it is something that is a testament in this training session that we've had. I've actually heard it myself. Thank you so much, and we look forward to more of this. So I'm calling from Zambia, southern part of Africa. So in the Copper Belt province, we have had the program to do with malaria control started way back in the 1920s when the inauguration of mining activities started. And this was pre-colonial era. And a group of scientists from Ross Institute in London came through to do the first entomological activities in this region. And one of the things they discovered was that the two important vector species, which is Anopheles funestus and Anopheles gambiensis, were implicated in malaria transmission. And so one of the things they implemented was larval source management. And part of it was involving the clearance and opening of drainages without the use of larviciding. And in the reports that ensued, they managed to bring down malaria drastically to an extent that it improved the economic status of the mine, and Zambia became one of the leading mine producing copper countries in Africa. So now the question is, the recent entomological survey that I conducted for one of the mines company that hired us to do the entomological surveillance just to understand certain aspect of this to improve on the interventions that they are implementing, which is IRS, larval source management, and government is also supplementing these efforts through the distribution of ITNs. And actually, Zambia now has moved from IRS. They have adopted the universal coverage of ITNs as the major intervention for malaria control throughout the country. And the Copperbelt region is also a beneficiary of this government intervention. So now the two vectors, they asked you on the Copperbelt to date from 1920s when it was first implicated, we still have them. So from this, from your understanding, and after having so much of these intervention implemented consistently on the Copperbelt, although there was a lag between 1970s when the economy and copper prices fell, and so even the mine also, the interventions kind of dwindled a bit, but there was resuscitation of these activities in the 1990s, all the way to date. So from this experience of where we have consistently the presence of these two vector interventions, what do you think could be done further in order to get rid of these vector species to protect people from the incidences of malaria, which sometimes relents and suddenly again we get to have spikes in malaria cases. For instance, the 2022,
Mulenga, we have to
2022
allow
into
other
2023.
people. We have to allow other people time to ask questions as well. So, have you finished posing your question, or do you want to elaborate on your question, Mulenga?
Well, he's on mute, but I can try answering what I
Okay.
think.
Yep.
What I
Okay.
think Malenko was asking in a situation where it's been years and years and there's been all this transmission, and actually in the Copper Belt up north in Zambia, there's so many mosquitoes and there's high transmission. What do we do after implementing vector control measures for years and years? And you're absolutely correct. This is important, and it is hard. Malaria is a hard disease to control, let alone eradicate and then eliminate. So the thing we need to figure out here is what can we do from the perspective of two reservoirs. And actually here we're going to actually look at vector interventions as well as epidemiological interventions. So think about it from this perspective. There are two reservoirs of parasites, one in mosquitoes, one in humans, and each one of them feeds the other. Right? Your vector interventions tackles the vector reservoir by killing and lowering the lifespan of those mosquitoes, and it prevents malaria transmission from the vector to humans. Treating humans does the opposite thing. If you have a really good vector intervention and a really bad human intervention, guess what? You're not going to eliminate malaria because one of them will continue the transmission cycle. So how can we attack both reservoirs as well as we can, as hard as we can, so that together both of them come down, and so it feeds off each other and reduces transmission? I'm pretty sure in the northern Zambia, the vector interventions are not, they only work a certain amount. They don't control all transmission, right? Because they may not fit completely over how the vector functions. They adjust that, and then you can see all the residual malaria coming out there. So what other interventions can we use in combination with human interventions? The So long answer. We can talk about that for months, but that's a short, long answer for that question. It's difficult.
Thank you, Mulenga, for that question. Mercy, you're up next. But could I ask audience members, try to keep your questions sharp. Thank you. Just to allow as many people as possible the opportunity to ask questions. But, you know, feel free to speak as long as you need to frame your question properly. So no problem. Mercy, please go ahead.
Okay, good morning, everybody from this side. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we
Very
can.
clearly, and thank you
Okay.
for volunteering for a question.
All right. So I'm a doctoral student trying to work on my proposal for malaria control, specifically vector susceptibility. So my question is sampling method for this insecticide resistance test. What do you think is appropriate? Since I'm not an entomologist, I'm just a molecular biologist who wants to focus on the lab. What sampling method do you think is best for me to use so that I can just get my samples and do the molecular work on it?
So if you're looking at insecticide resistance, if I understood your question properly, WHO recommends you use larval collections because what you're looking at is your larvae, and so their genetic makeup when you raise them in lab reflects resistance genetically, not based on exposure to chemicals out on the ground, because out in the wild, because you can get metabolic resistance. So if I'm exposed to a little bit of insecticide, I might get a little bit resistant, a little more, get a little more resistant. So if you sample larvae, that's your baseline level of resistance. And if you sample adults, those are adults based on their life history and what they were exposed to. Both of them answer slightly different questions. WHO recommends using larval collections, and of course you want all species, but you can also use adults, but again, there are caveats to that, and it answers a slightly different question.
So
Good.
if I get you right, sorry, I would work on larvae sample, not breeding them to adulthood.
Yeah, no, you take the larvae and raise them to adulthood.
Okay.
Yeah, raise them to adulthood in lab. You're
Okay.
right. Sorry.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
All right, at least on my screen, the next one is Asma. Asma, as soon as you're unmuted, then we'll let you speak to us. Dr. Porn or Wulan, can you unmute?
Yes, she can actually unmute herself now.
Okay, Asma, can you try and unmute? Bottom left of your screen, at least on my screen. We'll come back to you, Asma. Don't go away. While you're figuring out how to unmute, let's try Mercy. Mercy, click on your unmute button or on your audio button.
Sorry, he has answered my question. Let me put that only
Okay.
one.
All right.
Thank you.
Lower your hand. All right. So Asma, look at the bottom of your screen, far left, and just click on the audio to unmute yourself. If there are others who'd like to, we'll allow two more. Kabirul? Kabirul, Bangladesh. Long time no contact. Welcome aboard. Kabirul, please go ahead with your question.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, very clear. Please proceed.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to see you, both of you, Neil and Dr. Leo. I'm very happy to hear. I have a different questions regarding LLI. In my laboratory, I have tested LLI. Two type of LLI are available in Bangladesh and distributed. You know, one is delta methrin and another one is alpha cypermethrin. I have tested in my laboratory using the cone test, and I collected larvae from the field and emerged into the adult and then tested it. and I found that it is not working, and I found it is resistant. What is your opinion regarding this?
My opinion would be that your mosquitoes are resistant and that the intervention is probably not working as well. So I would approach the decision makers and tell them, look, the mosquito species that is transmitting malaria at my site is resistant to the vector interventions we are distributing. The next question would be, are there any alternatives as an active ingredients on the bed nets to distribute, or are there any alternative interventions that might work well in my area? And if there are none, and if we can't do anything, we might have to scale up our diagnosis and treatment to prevent transmission in the other direction. Do you remember vector control interventions versus diagnosis and treatment? So how can we maximize the protections, whether we're looking at vector control interventions or interventions with humans?
Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. So, Asma, I really would like to give you the opportunity to ask your question. So once again, apparently you are enabled to unmute yourself. So can I ask you, if you look at the bottom of your screen, extreme left, the left-hand-most side, there's an audio icon. There we go. Okay, wonderful. Asma, please ask your question. All right,
Good
Asma.
morning, sir.
Hey,
Sir,
good morning. Good morning. Go ahead.
my question is, I am working with indoor resting mosquitoes, and what is the epidemiological criteria when we want to explore the fauna of a particular district? Means in our district we have 45 uses, and I am working with only two. I have worked with only two uses, and in each UC is we have I have selected malaria outbreak hotspots. In that area, I have selected three villages, and in those three villages, I have focused on sleeping rooms for indoor resting mosquitoes by a spray sheet erythrum spray sheet method. So, sir, I have selected 10 houses from each village. So, I want to know that each house, the houses selected must be at what distance, means how much they must be far apart. The three villages are bordered, means they are adjacent to each other. And in that one area is all the houses in when there is outbreak, each and every person, kids, females, boys, all suffer from malaria. Even we have at each house we have 11 patients, 7 patients, means in that particular village. But in the nearby adjacent villages, the malaria cases are little less compared to that hotspot. Now, for my research work is on to find out vector intervention, malaria vector intervention in first of all, I am working on the composition, malaria vector composition in that area, and then I have focused on finding out which vector, which is the primary and secondary vector for causing malaria. Now, sir, houses must be at what distance?
Okay, so
Mean-
Thank
yes.
you, Asma.
yeah.
Thank
So
you.
Asma, your question is you're trying to figure out what is causing with an area with IRS, you're trying to figure out with a sampling frame of 10 houses per village, how far the houses should be from each other. So
Yes,
you
sir.
select your houses to be representative. And because there's such a high infection density, it sounds to me that the infections are happening in the house. So it would be important to realize what was happening there, which is why you're looking at IRS. I would try and find, I would try and do select houses across the entire area. So it's representative of the space, of the geography. So you can look at things that are close to larval sites versus far from larval sites. If possible, sort of draw a grid, and if you have 10 houses, pick 10 houses within your giant grid randomly and select those. So it's more unbiased and random. So it's a representative of what's happening at your site. I hope that answers your question.
Means, sir, we should follow random sampling.
Yeah.
Houses should be selected randomly.
Yeah, across your whole site. Yeah.
And sir, how much, like yesterday in SPT, you told us about budget and cost management, etc., etc. Now, sir, I am myself working on it. So, means 10 houses are enough from a particular union council.
If it fits in your budget,
Explore, it's fun.
if 10 houses fit in your budget, that's all you can do. And that's better than 9 houses. If you can fit in 11, 12, 15, I would do that. Base it on your outcomes. And if you don't find much of a difference between 10 houses, your entomological sampling means your sampling is pretty representative. If you have huge differences between houses, for example, if one house has 0 and one house has 200, you might need more larger sampling size, sampling framework to get more representative. But 10 sounds okay just from my experience. I hope you get a bigger budget.
Okay,
All
sir.
right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Asma. And I think we need to end it there. We're now going over our allocated time. So I'm hoping that our audience members will agree that this has been a truly satisfying course, enjoyable, easy to digest, well presented, great depth of information that has been shared with us, and we've all benefited from it. So to our audience members, sincere thank you for your patience, your persistence in staying with us over the duration of this course. I hope you agree, or I hope you feel it has been worth your while. And then to Professor Neil Lobo, our deepest appreciation for being willing to present this course. And we're going to try our level best to twist his arm to repeat this course next year. It has been so popular and it is such a highly relevant topic that, I'm going to do my level best to persuade our APMEN headquarters in Singapore to endorse a follow-on course next year. And hopefully Neil will be available and willing to do a rerun of this course because it is so good. So to Professor Neil Lobo, sincere, deep thanks to you. To Dr. Porn, to Wulan, wonderful backroom facilitation and looking after the technical side of things to make sure everything runs smoothly. To the two of you, deep thanks as well. So please go well. Thank you, everyone. All the best to you.
See you, everyone, and have a good day.
Thank you.